Hello and welcome to Weekly MTG. I'm your host, Blake Rasmussen, and this week we are talking Arena Premier Play and a little bit of Tabletop Premier Play as well. To talk about those things, I have my good friends, God, I never know it this way, over here. Kyle and Billy Jensen are here to share all the details. If you don't know who they are, let's let them introduce themselves. Let's start with you, Kyle.
Yeah, my name is Kyle Knudson. For many, many years, I was running paper Magic tournaments, and I'm currently associate digital product manager on Arena, and I'm responsible for our Premier Play system and other events that happen on Arena.
All right, Billy.
I'm William Huey Jensen. I am director of play programs at Wizards of the Coast, and formerly I was a professional Magic player.
Yeah. So Billy, set the scene for us, set expectations on the scale of completely revamping the system and throwing everything out with the bathwater all the way to, like, we're tweaking a few numbers. Where does this show sit?
So let's see. I think from an Arena perspective, I think we're making some really, really good and interesting changes that I think will be pretty popular. And from a tabletop perspective, I think we are making some pleasant updates.
Pleasant updates. That just sounds lovely. It sounds like springtime. Yeah. It sounds like we're just doing some things. So let's start on talking about the changes. We're just going to dive right into it. We will have a Q&A session at the end. So as people have questions, keep them in the back of your head, and I'll be checking chat as we go along. Okay, so we're making some changes to Arena Premier Play. We'll talk about the tabletop stuff later. We're going to set this aside. Before we get into those, why are we making changes at all?
So for the past year and a half, we have been running Premier Play and Arena, Premier Play and Tabletop, and I've been out at the Pro Tour a lot, various regional championships, and a lot of feedback I ended up getting was actually about our Arena system. We have a lot of hybrid players that like to participate in both systems. A lot of people are really passionate about Arena, and I brought that feedback back, and with the Arena team, we just did what we thought was best to sort of address that feedback, clarify the points between Arena and Tabletop, and give the players the experience they were asking for, basically.
All right. So Kyle, Billy's out there hearing all of that from the PT crowd. What were you hearing on the Arena side?
On the Arena side, we were hearing a lot of feedback that the system was a little too restrictive, right? Like 32 players in the Arena Championship is a very small field, which as a result of that, it's very difficult to get to the Arena Championship, right? To be one of those 32 players, it's a tough path. We had the leaderboard system that tried to encourage people to sort of chase that if they didn't quite make it through day 2 of a qualifier weekend. But we also weren't seeing a ton of players actually playing in multiple qualifier weekends. So it's in the actual result of that felt more like, if you got close but not quite, you probably were going to make it to the championship, but you didn't know for a few months, right? We wanted to make it a lot more clear when you've cleared that bar, when you know you're going to make it to the next step, and sort of open it up a little bit and make it a little bit easier for people to engage with the system and be successful in the Arena Premier Play system.
All right, we're going to get into the details in a moment, but just to make sure that everybody's mindset is correct and knows what they're looking at, when are these changes that we're about to talk about, when are they going to start?
So this new changes will start with the qualifier weekend in May. So the qualifier weekend that's happening next weekend and in April will still be the old system. They're qualifying for Arena Championship 6, which will still have 32 players. And so all these changes will start with the system that qualifies for Arena Championship 7 that starts in May of this year.
Okay, so that new system that starts in May, what is it? Go.
Well, let's start with the Arena Championship, because that's sort of where the biggest change is. Previously was 32 players, and now it's going to be uncapped. So as many people can qualify through day 2, all of those players will make it to the Arena Championship. We expect to 120 player range and then hopefully grow a little bit over the course of a year or so of Arena Championships. And we're also adding to the prize pool with those additional players. We're also adding $50,000 to the total prize, going up from 200 to 250,000. The finalists, top two, will still get their invite to the World Championship, but new to the Arena Championship is the top 16 players will also qualify for the Pro Tour. Previously, these Pro Tour invites were attached to success in the qualifier weekends, but with only some of those, like you needed to actually get 7 wins in the qualifier weekend to get that invite. And so not everybody who played in the Arena Championship previously really had an opportunity to convert that to a spot at the Pro Tour. And so we wanted to make it a little more even for everyone, as well as it's going to give away additional invites. Like a previous system, I think we were qualifying somewhere between 10 and 12 players per Arena Championship. So now we're going to get the full top 16. So 16 of our players will make it to the Pro Tour.
All right. So obviously this necessitates some changes to the qualifiers. So what do those look like?
Yeah, let's take one step down and we'll start with day 2 of the qualifier weekend. This is what leads directly to the Arena Championship. Previously, you still needed to get 7 wins in order to clear that bar. That's going to drop down to 6 wins. So it's a little bit easier on day 2. And then in addition to that, the old system, if you failed to qualify, you sort of just went back to the starting point, right? You did not really have a great way. You had to re-qualify through a play-in or through the Mythic rank ladder. And so now if you fall just short, but you get at least 1 win on day 2, you'll get an invite token directly to the next qualifier weekend. So you have to skip a little bit of the line and you get another shot in the following month. And if you get 4 and 5 wins, you go straight to day 2. So you won't even need to play in that day 1 event. And so you'll have an even easier path if you get close but not quite, because we wanted to have that the result of the leaderboard where you still got rewarded for being close but not actually getting to the end of the win track. We wanted to preserve that sort of fallback prize for them.
Okay, and just to be clear, is the leaderboard completely going away?
Yes, the at-large leaderboard will no longer be a path to qualify for the Arena Championship. So your success on day 2 will either result in making it to the Arena Championship or earning your seat in the next month's qualifier weekend to hopefully get another shot at it. All
right. Well, let's take a look at qualifier weekend. Day 1 changes. Tell us what tweaks you made here.
Day 1 change is real subtle. The only thing we're doing is changing the number of losses that you have to give. When we were looking at the results and sort of the number of players that were making it from day 1 to day 2, we recognized that going 7-1 is hard. Like and almost no competitive 2-day event that we've done that requires a 7-1 record to make it to day 2. And so this sort of brings us more in line with some other competitive events you may have played in the past where you can have a couple of losses to give before you're completely eliminated.
Okay. And then let's go back to the Arena Championship real quick. Talk a little bit about that structure and maybe what it means for formats as well.
Yeah, so the by having more than 32 players, the structure of that event is going to change a little bit. I don't have full details to talk about today for what that Arena Championship will look like. We still have Arena Championship 5 that's happening at the end of this month, and Arena Championship 6 coming later this year that will still be the same structure of 32 players and a mix of limited and constructed. But once those details are published and we start talking about Arena Championship 7 in earnest, we'll have a lot more information about the structural change to the championship itself. There will still be one constructed format, so players won't have to necessarily try and get good with multiple decks and things like that. So a lot of the things you love about the Arena Championship will still be there, but the specific details will reveal later down the line. We're a little closer.
All right. And Billy, he mentioned the Pro Tour invites, where there were always kind of 16 slots, but they never really used them. Does this affect, do these changes affect tabletop at all?
They affect tabletop in terms of we can more precisely make sure Arena is adequately supported in the Pro Tour by clarifying that the invite point. The 16 invites coming for the Arena Championship is a lot easier to fine tune than, the way the qualifier weekends work, where it's like some number of people get 7 wins day one, then some number of people get 7 wins in day two. It's a lot harder to plan than people qualify for one big event where we can invite a fixed number of people. So in the aggregate, Arena is going to be better supported in the top ends of our tabletop competitive play system.
All right.
I'm also really excited about the fact that all the players for one championship will also go to the same Pro Tour, where right now the system, because of timing and the way the months are laid out in the calendar, not every player that qualified to the Pro Tour who's playing in AC5 is going to the same Pro Tour. So they'll be mixed up between a couple of different events. And so now we'll have all 16 players who qualified at the same time. They all will get to go to the same Pro Tour. So we'll have this like sort of mini cohort of Arena players that I'll get to watch and see how successful they are at the Pro Tour.
All right. Now, speaking of invites, let's actually, before we go, remind everyone, because I've seen this question again, when does this new system start?
New system starts with the May qualifier weekend. So the next two, the one in a couple of weeks and the one in April, those are still the old system that requires the old number of wins. These changes will start with May's qualifier weekend, which is the first qualifier weekend that qualifies for Arena Championship 7.
Yep. All right, and I do see a few. All right, we're gonna linger on this and get some chat questions that are specifically about the arena portion before we jump into tabletop, just to make sure we kind of stay on topic, and then we'll circle back. So let's go for a couple questions. How about qualifying through ladder?
We actually didn't make a ton of changes to the part of the system pre-qualifier weekends. You can qualify through the ladder still. So if you make Mythic in either Constructed or Limited, and you're the top 250, you'll get an invite token for that month's qualifier weekend. And 251 through 1200 will still get play-in points. We still have play-ins that lead into every qualifier weekend. The one change that we are making to this sort of section that lead in is there will be additional play-in events that happen. I believe qualifier weekend or Arena Championship 7's qualifying period will have one bonus play-in that happens in July, and that will be sort of an additional opportunity for players to spend their play-in points or have another shot at earning their qualified weekend tokens into the system. It's something that we are definitely keeping an eye on, but with all the changes to the top end of the system, we didn't want to make drastic changes to both sides and then suddenly have way more players than we can handle. So we wanted to see how people respond to the changes at the Arena Championship level and the path that leads directly into that. And I will be spending most of my time keeping an eye on the start of the funnel when these changes go into place and how those play-in points are actually being earned and utilized, and trying to make sure that it is an effective way for players to qualify through the system.
All right. Will the traditional sealed event be updated to award play-in points?
That's a very fine question. It's not something we had considered, but I'll take it back to the team. It's relatively easy from a technical standpoint to add prizes to certain events like that. So I don't want to make any promises, but that does align with how we have the traditional drafts that give out the play-in points and the other constructed events that as well. So we'll take a look at that for sure. It's a good suggestion.
Okay. Kyle, I think you spoke to this a little bit before, but it's a good question for expectation setting for the new Arena Championship. The question, as worded, was historically, how many players would have 6 wins be in the Arena Championship? Curious what number of players you expect in Arena Champs moving forward.
Yeah, previously we had, like, if we had done this system with sort of the old qualifier weekends, and just took everyone that had 6 wins. That's sort of what the at-large leaderboard is. You can go on magic.gg now and see a history of the last few Arena Championships and look at the at-large leaderboard for how many people had 6 wins across the different qualifier weekends. But in addition to like the additional players who will be in day 2, both coming back from the previous month's qualifier weekend and the easier path through day 1, we think is going to actually have probably 2 or 3 times the number of players getting that 6-win hurdle or getting over that 6-win hurdle. So I think I mentioned in passing, but my expectation is this first Arena Championship 7 will probably be somewhere in the range of 100 to 120 players.
All right. Uncle Cardboard in chat is stealing my job and helping us with the transition. So, Billy, here's the question in chat. That's
I see it.
It's the perfect transition. With PT invites being added for the Arena Championship, is there any discussion about scaling the number of PT invites at large for regional championships?
Well, only because Uncle Cardboard is suggesting it. Let's put up the graphic.
Yes, here. All right, talk us through this.
We are scaling up the invites. This is starting with the next RC round, the one in May. Every region's getting some amount more invites. Basically, we looked at both overall Magic play in a region, and we looked at competitive play in a region. And frankly, they pretty much told exactly the same story in how to make the invites. For a little bit of context here, this is all Simon Nielsen's fault. He just took too many invites out of the system. No, I'm just kidding. When we launched this system, we did err on the side of caution. We definitely, at the end of our last tabletop system, for a little extra context, things were getting big, and they were potentially going to get bigger and bigger. Due to the pandemic, that system ended somewhat abruptly, and that course never played out. So we were pretty sensitive to making sure stuff didn't balloon. It is also true, the Simon Nielsen joke is part a joke, but it is also true that, look, we all know good Magic players are good at Magic, but we definitely underestimated a little bit of the invite overlap. And that combined with the fact that, frankly, I think, and this is not just, me, but player feedback and people talking to me again over the last period of time, the Pro Tour can just be a bit bigger than 300. 350, 375 maybe is even fine. So with this increase here, we're willing to let those events get a little bit bigger. These are the invites that go from the tabletop RCs to the Pro Tour.
Yeah, which answers one of the questions in chat. These are invites to the Pro Tour from the regional championships. Absolutely. All right. That, I think, covers all of the information that we wanted to proactively share. So it's time for Q&A. I've been following along in chat a little bit, but chat, it does make it a little bit easier if you tag your question with @Magic, and I will try to get to it. Now, we are going to focus on Premier Play questions. Kyle works on the Arena team, but that doesn't mean he knows all things about all Arena decisions. But we are going to talk through as many of the Premier Play focused decisions as we can. But we're going to start with you, Billy, because I'm seeing some variations of the same question. About the new size of the invites. People are noting that USA got doubled. A couple of how can you talk a little bit about your process for figuring out those new numbers?
Yeah, honestly, I showed it to you. My team and I made a weighted spreadsheet of total Magic play and total competitive play in a region, and we went as close as possible to making the actual invites accurately reflect those proportions as we could. I know a lot of people say US is too big or whatever. Frankly, if we did it evenly, the US would have gotten slightly more. So
it's just math.
It's just math.
It's just math. All right, let's go back to Kyle, because I've seen a number of questions about Arena Opens and asking about the future of those. Can we do constructed Arena Opens? Do you have anything to share there?
Yeah, Arena Opens will continue to happen. We're pretty happy with the participation in those events, and how much engagement, how many people seem to really enjoy. I love watching both on Twitch and on social media all the people sharing their success through those events. We don't have any big changes for that, as they still will be limited. I don't have a plan for constructed opens, at least not yet. Although I toss the idea out every so often because I know the first time we do one, it'll be very exciting. It'll make a lot of noise. But currently, they are still planned to be limited for the foreseeable future. They will also continue to have the qualifier weekend invites, and so everything nothing about these changes are touching the arena opens or our plans with that.
All right. Billy, some questions on timing. I know we said May, but some people are asking, do the invites start with regional championship in Dallas or regional championship in DC?
All the global regional championships starting in May that feed Pro Tour Amsterdam.
So yeah, feeding Pro Tour Amsterdam starting in May. There we go.
So Dallas. For the sake of the U.S., it would be Dallas, yeah.
All right. Kyle, will Timeless ever get a qualifier weekend?
Timeless will get a qualifier weekend as soon as that format calms down a little bit. It keeps it's crazy. We're watching the different decks every week, and show and tell being very popular currently, and it's to us it's just a little too volatile as people are still really exploring and figuring out what decks are. We want to have a better idea of what that format will be before we put it through a competitive lens. There is a metagame challenge coming up though. It's next weekend or early April. So that'll be our first sort of quasi-competitive experience with Timeless, and we're going to learn a lot from that to see whether or not we think it'll make sense for a qualifier weekend.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. I'm a big fan of Timeless myself. People asking when the article recap for the stream will be up at the conclusion of the stream.
I did see one question. Forgive me for not knowing who asked, but they wanted to clarify whether or not in the new system the qualifier weekend day 2 will have the Pro Tour invites, and that's I think an important distinction. So March and April, the players who get 7 wins will still go to the Pro Tour. But after that, in May, the qualifier weekend day 2 will no longer have the Pro Tour invite component. Those invites moved to the Arena Championship from qualifier weekend day 2s.
Yeah.
So just want to make sure that's clear to folks.
Yep. All right. Next question. I'll take this one. Can we get a system like this for Mitgo? Changes for each format each week, and also. So this team does not manage the Mitgo system. A little birdie / the Mitgo team did tell me they are going to have updates to their system that they're also announcing today. Pure coincidence, but that should be going up around 10:30, which is in approximately about 7 minutes. And that is through the Mitgo channels. Not this team, but we like them. We work with them closely, so they give us a heads up on these things. Let's see. Let's see. I think we've answered a few of these. All right, a lot of questions, Kyle, about and take this as feedback or whatever. Ranked best of 3 drafts.
Ranked best of 3 drafts is something that we actually hear a lot, and there's a lot of discussion we have internally about what play experience should contribute to ranked and what shouldn't. And we hear you, and I can't make any promises, but I will hopefully we'll take that feedback and we'll see what we can do. Best of 3 draft it's tough because we also it is not as adopted as the other draft formats like best of 1 and the premier draft is played much more than best of 3 draft. And so we want to also make sure that if we are putting additional incentives there, that players are going to get a good experience, and that we aren't just trying to urge people to do something that they may not have as much fun doing. I don't know. It's a complicated thing that we certainly are talking about it internally for sure.
All right. Kyle, we'll stick with you for this one. Any changes expected for the separation of arena constructed ladder?
I not none that I'm aware of. It's something that I've certainly thought about and talked about internally. I think technically it's not. It's just like turning a key and having it suddenly have the ranked system separated between formats. But we do know that there's an appetite for that. And it's something we will certainly spend some time investigating how difficult it would be to try and create that. Because I think that having them all combined does do a little bit of a disservice, where if you are just really interested in your one format and you want to know how you compare against other people in that format, I think that makes a ton of sense. And we just got to figure out what the work is needed to make it happen.
All right, Billy, going back to you. And this is, I think, a broader philosophical question about the entire system. So take it however you want. Any reason we can't have a point system for RCQs instead of trying to spike an event?
I mean, there's certainly not one reason. The short answer is there's not short answer. An answer is there's a lot of regional systems where we have regional partners managing them. They could each come out with their own point system to try to qualify more people to the regional championship. But the end result is the regional championship qualifiers are pretty, from my perspective, pretty different in size and pretty different in cadence in some places compared to others. Like, from a U.S. perspective, I would imagine if you were in New York City, you could play one every weekend, and the fractional rewards become extremely complicated in those scenarios, both from an implementation and from just an ongoing management perspective.
All right. Billy, we'll stay with you on this one. And I don't know how true the premise of this question is, but I'm sure you do because you've seen the data. So the question is, as there has been a large increase in competitive play in the Middle East, could we ever expect a separation of Middle East and Africa from the European qualification for the PT?
Can we ever expect something is a challenging question to answer. Right. There's no plans for it right now, but if it ever made sense, we would continue to evaluate it. That's about the best I can do on that one.
Makes sense. Let's see. What else we got here? Here, fellow old player here. Will we ever use our DCI numbers for competitive play again?
Nope.
Probably not. Frame that thing. Enjoy it.
I've got it. My DCI number memorized, and it's just going to live in a shelf in my brain forever.
Me too.
I am pretty sure if I sat down and thought about it, I still have mine memorized, and I haven't used it in like a decade or whatever. There's some comments about separate ladders, but I'm pretty sure you answered that, Kyle. Here's another one from our good friend Uncle Cardboard. Is there any talk about extending the window to join a qualifier weekend?
That is something I'm going to keep an eye on now that we have more players, and I'm going to be looking at a lot of the timing of how players are actually engaged, because this affects both the entry window and the end of the event. Like, we have a rule for the last player standing, and every time it gets triggered, we see the one player who sat in a queue for an hour and a half hoping that they will find somebody, and that we don't have a way to sort of take care of that. And so I'm going to be paying very close attention to how players are actually playing in these events, when these matches happen, and if it makes sense to extend that window a little bit, because I know that having that window be sort of 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. and Pacific time every month can be difficult for players in other regions and other time zones. And so it's something that I'm aware of and will be paying a lot of attention to, but I don't have anything to announce or talk about for updates to that.
Yep. I see the questions about Pioneer Masters, but that's not Kyle's area, so I'm not going to put him on the spot for that sort of thing. Let's see. Also, I see the questions about spectator mode, also not Kyle's area of expertise. So I see you in chat.
I will say, I really want there to be a spectator. As the person who coordinates coverage for our events, I also really want a spectator mode. it's not being actively worked on. It's not something that is necessarily coming, but you're not the only one that wants this. So if we find a way, know that I'm carrying that flag and trying to make it happen every step of the way.
All right. Billy, we'll go back to you. So on the other side of the RC size spectrum from the Middle East Africa question, is there any consideration for splitting U.S. RCs since these sizes are reaching 1,300 participants?
Yes, we've talked about it, and we've thought about when that goes from more of a discussion to an imperative, or maybe a possibility to an imperative. But yes, we're aware of it, and yes, we've discussed it, or are discussing it. Is maybe more precise than have discussed it.
Great. Back to Kyle. Would it be possible to have a wider variety of formats for the qualifiers now that we're getting more of them, draft specifically?
Yeah, draft. I think one of the changes we made in the last year or so to Arena Opens was to draft in day 2, and the feedback we've seen from that is great. And I definitely want to look into if it makes sense or if we can replicate that. It turns out that having 6 wins needed for qualifier weekend day 2 is exactly 2 booster drafts, right? Weird how that works. So while I don't have anything to confirm today, the change to the system does make it a little bit easier to make adjustments like that and maybe give it a shot.
All right. Let's see. I see a bunch of questions in here that are either we've talked about a lot in the past and we're not going to rehash today, or I know we don't have answers for them. I see your questions, though. They're all very good questions, and we'll take them as feedback. I'm just seeing if there's anything else that I think you all might have an answer for. Sure. Kyle, is there any consideration to adding a league system and challenges to Arena similar to Midgo?
It's something that I personally want, and we talk about a lot, right? How do we, maybe not one-to-one what Midgo is doing for their leagues, but certainly how can we better sort of surface player success in Arena, because people see their top deck lists from those leagues and these other things getting published out of Magic Arena, and it is sort of something for players to aspire to, and that's the thing we want to sort of chase with whatever how version of this we implement on Arena. And we want to give players sort of a clear path to how do I get highlighted, how do I get my success shown, and how do they can track their progress and see their path and accomplishments over a period of time, which is stuff that you don't have a lot of insight into on Arena. Yeah.
All right. Okay, I think before we end the stream, I'm seeing some decent questions in there that I just know we aren't able to answer today. We either don't have the right people or it's just not the right topic. But great questions. So before we end the stream, let us revisit those changes one more time on the Arena side and then the tabletop side. So let's put the graphics back up before we go. You can see here the Arena Championship, uncapped number of players resulting in 16 players qualifying for the Pro Tour with an additional $50,000 in prizing in those Arena Championships. Finalists still get invited to the World Championship. Day 2, we are now moving to 6 wins qualifying for the Arena Championship. There's no incentive to get to 7 wins anymore. And then 1 to 3 wins or 4 to 5 wins qualifies you for either day 1 or day 2 of the next qualifier weekend. And then speaking of day 1, slightly easier to make day 2. Instead of 2 losses ending your run, it now takes 3 losses to end your run. And then let's take a look at those tabletop editions. Yep, there's the Premier Play ladder for Arena. And again, a lot of these details are going to be available on magic.gg after this. Premier Play ladder ending the World Championship. And then, yes, here's the updated Regional Championship updates or invites. This is going to be starting with the regional championship round in May globally. Just straight up more invites added to the system, which is great news for everyone who plays in those events. All right. Thank you, Kyle and Billy, for joining us. Thank you, everyone in chat, for coming with some great questions. Next week, we are going to be back with Matt Tabak and Dave Humphreys for the, what set are we doing? The after show on debut for Outlaws of Thunder Junction. That is the set we're going to be doing. We're going to be previewing a bunch of cards. We're going to be introducing you to some mechanics for the set and just generally kicking off preview season with a ton of previews. So you'll definitely want to tune back in here next week. Until then, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.